Fantastic. Well, welcome to the second session of this Cockburn Association conference, Whose Festival Is It Anyway? Discussing where we find ourselves in relation to Edinburgh's legendary but often contested festivals during this pandemic, which has forced everyone connected with such major arts events to have a big rethink of what's going to be possible in the future. And how the pandemic is going to impact these events that we come to take so much for granted. This session is called Arts in the City, Local Needs, Global Aspirations, and it wants to address the questions of what kind of arts would serve, does serve or do serve Edinburgh best. What are people actually looking for from a better festival in the future from the point of view of Edinburgh as a city? How does it need to change? What kind of work should it be doing that it isn't doing? What kind of work should it perhaps not be doing that it is doing? And where would public funds in a continuing age of austerity be best invested? Or is even talking about a continuing age of austerity accepting an economic agenda against which artists should rebel? I've seen the idea that we're in an inevitable age of declining funding and continuing austerity used to bully artists for the last 10, 15, even 20 years. You know, I wonder whether we need to accept that we're going into an age of austerity for the arts. And what, final question in this session, what best reflects the spirit of the festivals? So this is where we begin to talk about how we flesh out the spirit of the festivals in ways that are really going to work for the 21st century and are going to involve the people of Edinburgh and everyone in Edinburgh as much as possible, as well as having an international dimension. And once again, we've got three fantastic speakers for this session. Andrew Crummy was born in Craigmillar, where his mother, Helen, the astonishing Helen Crummy, an absolutely wonderful arts animator, organizer and inspiration, was a community activist and founder of the Craigmillar Festival Society. That was Helen, Andrew's mother. So Andrew was raised and nurtured in an environment rich in community arts involving festivals, drama, music, clowns, colour and laughter. That bit's in quotes from Andrew. He went on to study at Duncan of Jordanston and then Glasgow School of Art. He was the guiding force behind the public mural trail in Preston Pans in the early 2000s. His magnificent tapestries commemorating the Battle of Preston Pans and the Scottish diaspora, and above all, his great tapestry of Scotland, have all rightly won him international acclaim. He now lives and works in Cockenzie on the south shore of the Forth near Preston Pans, a locality rich in natural, cultural and social heritage. So Andrew, welcome to our panel. We're also later on going to be meeting Shauna Mcdonald and Julia Amour. And is it Amour or Amour, Julia? I always get that wrong.
I don't mind, Joyce, but Amour is the way my
Amour, how you see it, that's right. So we're going to be meeting them shortly, but I'll introduce them when they first speak. Andrew, do you want to kick us off by having a bit of a go at this kind of question? What kind of art does Edinburgh need going forward?
Going forward, I think, well, I come from a community arts background, and that's what I'll be really speaking about today. And I can remember going up to the festival in my buggy with my mum. We used to walk up with my two brothers in the 60s. And, you know, the festival there was 3 events in the 60s and such like things. And it was really partly the inspiration for the Craigmillar Festival Society that this festival, the Edinburgh Festival, was there. And it's really been a part of my life right up to the present day. You know, when I lived in London, I used to come back every year at August to do the festival because it was just so fantastic. And there were so many amazing bits of work and everything there. So I've been personally connected with it for many years. The way forward, I think, is more difficult, but the Craigmillar Festival is probably the model. It's the most interesting one for this, is that what my mother did with the Festival Society, and it was the women of Craigmillar looking after their bairns, really. That's what the statue in Craigmillar represents. And, you know, at its high point, you know, half the community of Craigmillar was involved in the festival, where it recognised that everybody is creative, everybody has a right to perform, everybody has a right to be heard. And I think that's a really good philosophy to be going forward with. And, you know, if the festival adopted more of that mantra, I think you would get a more, maybe a more positive thing where everybody felt they were part of the Edinburgh Festival. This sort of community arts thesis, you know, everyone is creative, and I think that really answers it in the general terms.
So how would you reconcile that with what the official festival has traditionally done, which is to programme you know, major international artists, so as to give people in Edinburgh a chance to, you know, experience whatever, you know, the best of sort of global culture?
Yeah, I think that but it was, everyone's creative, but also you had key professionals in Craigmillar in the 70s. You know, you had Bill Patterson, Billy Connolly came. You know, most of the Scottish theatre came to Craigmillar in the 70s, and it's that combination of the local and the really fantastic professionals. With the Three Harbours, the Three Harbours Arts Festival, which I was also the chair of for 10 years, we did the same thing. We had Tasman Little come to play the violin for the Mackenzie power station. So we lit up the power station chimneys, you know. So it's a combination of both. It's about everybody it's a combination. You can't do it. You got to get the balance right. Maybe the balance isn't quite right at the moment, but I think I definitely think the other thing about, just what to say about the festival was, this is a good analogy of the community arts impact in the Edinburgh Festival. You know, in the 60s there was no street theatre, but the street theatre really started because of the Neil Cameron, who was in the Edinburgh Workshop. Edinburgh Theatre Workshop. He one day was juggling at the Royal outside the gallery at the Mound, and a policeman came up to him and said, "Can you stop doing that?" Because Neil was about 20 at the time, and he said, "No, I want to juggle." And the policeman said, "Can you stop, please?" And he said, "No." And the policeman said, "If you keep doing that, everybody's going to want to do it." And so, and Neil said, "Well, that's why I'm doing it." So. Yeah. But that's my point, is that street theatre, all the jugglers and all that comes from the community arts ethos, and that's very that's forgotten about, you know. But so it's just one more aspect of opening up.
Yeah, Andrew, just before we move on to Shauna, do you have any thoughts? Because we talked about the international festival and the role of that, you know, bringing the sort of great international artists into contact with people in Edinburgh. But what about the Fringe? Do you have any thoughts about what could be done about the Fringe? I mean, it's essentially grown to the size that it is spontaneously. Nobody invites all these people to come. It's an open access festival. I mean, the big venues play a role, obviously, but the Fringe organisation centrally doesn't invite people to come. A lot of the people who come have got nothing to do with Edinburgh, and therefore are perceived, at least by some, as a problem, but other people love that aspect of it and think, well, you know, the more the merrier. I mean, do you have any thoughts about what the future of the Fringe should look like?
Well, I think the Edinburgh actually has lots of festivals, it has lots of galas, it has lots of, the Borders has the ridings, you know, there's lots of local events that are happening all the time that are cultural, but in a different way. And again, I think it's about, you know, the Craigmillar Festival is trying to start again, to do the festival again this year, but it's not there because it can't get the funding. I think it's linking the Fringe more with the local festivals, which there's a lot of them going on at the moment, and they will continue wherever, because most of them do it for nothing. So I think it's about linking the local festivals, and there's many of them all over the place, linking that more with the Fringe. I mean, you've got a little bit of it with the Fringe on at North Berwick, but you need it much wider to recognise that there is actually a lot of cultural activity going on at the moment all over Scotland, but particularly around Edinburgh, because of the festival.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like small is beautiful, and with a lot of these events, and big is extremely ugly for some people in relation to the Fringe. It is just absolutely
But they're not tied. But they're not tied up. But they're not.
No,
they're not linked.
They don't link closely enough. And you know, most of the people who are involved in the Fringe are kind of aware of that, but they don't seem to really be able to do anything about it. You know, I mean, the big producers and all that. Right, so lots of fascinating stuff there. Thank you so much, Andrew. We're going to move on to Shauna Mcdonald. Shauna is an actor. Hi, Shauna. She began her career in the film The Debt Collector, and that was with
Billy Connolly.
Billy Connolly, yeah, and who wrote it?
Ken Stop, Anthony Nielsen.
That's right, it was Anthony Nielsen wrote the script, and yeah, fantastic cast, including Shauna, and has appeared in a variety of well-known films and television series ever since, including The Descent, Spooks, and Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Fantastic.
It's true.
In Plain Sight, The Cry, Danger Mouse. Shauna teaches the art of public speaking. And since 2014, she has also been the co-director of the Edinburgh Youth Theatre, based in Portobello, which teaches Edinburgh's young people about all aspects of theatre and film production. So welcome, Shauna, and give us a few thoughts to kick off with on this subject of local needs and global aspirations, and what kind of art Edinburgh needs.
Brilliant. Well, it's a massive question. So I think what I'll do is I'll just give you a very quick rundown of how I'm in the position I am at the moment. So Edinburgh Youth Theatre, which you can see here, is not the Edinburgh Youth Theatre of old that used to inhabit in the Stockbridge or also the Pleasance. Edinburgh Youth Theatre, when I got involved in it, was called Porty Youth Theatre. It was a very small drama club that two of my three girls attended where I live in Portobello. And it was going to, one of the teachers couldn't carry on because she wanted to have a bit of maternity leave. So as an actor, as actors do, you go, I can do that, I'll do that, I can do that. And I said, I will teach the classes, it's fine, I'll do it on a Saturday. So Porty Youth Theatre has grown and grown and grown. And the Edinburgh Youth Theatre, which we've gone into now, has only existed since 2018. So we're fairly new on the scene in terms of that. My sole focus and our team's sole focus is about creating confidence. It's about removing the obstacles to participation. So, and by doing that, it's mostly financial obstacles. So we have a pay what you can scheme, which was engulfed by when COVID hit. And luckily enough, our patron is James Mcavoy, and he did start a James Mcavoy Bursary scheme, and we are endlessly fundraising to try and support all our participants. Our goal is to create confidence in young people, and that's by giving them the skills of communication, creating a very safe space to nurture them, and for them to know that they have a creative voice that should be heard and their voice is of value. So how do we actually do that? We do it through weekly classes, we do it in collaboration with outreach projects at schools, where, you know, it's our obstacle is always about getting the money to do these things. Now, when I met James Mcavoy years and years ago, we went to a youth theatre in Musselburgh, and we didn't have to pay to go there. And he's a massive advocate for access to the arts, as am I. But it's really about, for me, my journey of I'm still an actor. I was in 2019, the Fringe of 2019, I did Mouthpiece at the Traverse, which was a massive hit, and we went on a world tour. I was actually in New Zealand at the beginning of lockdown and came back. So my sort of dual position at the moment is trying to work as a high end as an actor in this industry, which is a fickle mistress, but also to create opportunities for young people so they are not just seeing art, they are creating art. They're part of that process. And I have a huge frustration with the lack of expressive arts that young people are exposed to in primary schools, because if we want everybody to participate in the arts, it can't be an extracurricular activity, because most people won't get to that. It has to be integrated throughout their learning from the age of 5. And I've actually gone back to school. I'm doing a master's at the RCS on learning and teaching in the arts to try and form a plan to approach Education Scotland so they have no wriggle room and they can't argue with me that if you can't express yourself and you can't speak properly, then there's no way that you're going to go on and be all the 4 learning outcomes that they express in the getting it right for every child. So I don't know the answers. I'm really excited to be at this table. I do know last year that when we as Edinburgh Youth Theatre put on a show in the Fringe, which we do every year, it's £1,600 for the venue for a week. And that's before you even touch any rehearsals, before you even pay to get into the brochure for the Fringe, before you buy the rights for the play that you're going to do, which you have to do a popular show to make sure that people come. So you can, you know, address the budget with the ticket sales. So that's where I'm at the moment. Now, where we are in Portobello, it's very active. We use art a lot to activate the community. I was part of the board of Belfield. I don't know if you know Belfield. It was the first community buyout using the urban and right to buy in the community in the land reform. So I produced cabaret days and cabaret nights with local artists, young artists, professional artists. I wrote plays for it. So it was, you know, filled with drama and what Andrew was talking about, laughter and colour, and these are the arts. Let's talk about what's happening in your community. Let's devise a piece of theatre about the community, and let's really feel that, you know, there's this divide as well with what is high art and what is low art, and what art is important, and how to make sure that the people that are creating art in a community art is important, and it's of a higher thing. The young people I work with and the community artists that I work with, they value themselves more when they know they're in something that's good. It's not just enough to push young people on stage and get them to sing a song and therefore they're doing art. It's about being part of the process, the devising process, and the decisions.
Yeah, fantastic. Shauna,
yes.
As an artist yourself, you know, as an actor and a director and all the other things you do, how important have the festivals been to you in your, you know, in your sort of personal development and your career?
Well, I do love walking along the beach and people bumping into me in June and asking me if I'm going to do a show at the Fringe, and I say that is just not the process. I can't afford to lose money at the Fringe. I can't afford to do a profit share at the Fringe. The Fringe, to produce your own show at the Fringe is so incredibly expensive, and you have to have money to lose. Mm-hmm. And I don't have that. The last show I did was 2019, and actually it's not through want of trying, but I had a 7-year break from the stage completely, because every time I want to put on a show as an actor, I've got to audition, and there's thousands of us trying to get the same part. So the Fringe for me as just an actor, not someone that constantly produces and creates their own work, it's not hugely important to me as a performer, not because I don't want to get on the stage, it's because it's a battle just to get the part, to get on the stage. Never mind put the money into a production yourself to lose. Yeah.
And the festivals sort of mean anything to you in terms of stuff that you were able to see, you know, and kind of, you know, at formative moments in your life and all that?
Of course, but the massive battle as well is the price, you know, and if you're going to see anything on the free Fringe as well, it's you don't know the quality, and you don't necessarily know if you can get in. I was speaking to Alistair Friend, who's the head teacher of Tower Bank School and also the head of expressive arts at Portobello High School. There's no money really to take young people anywhere, and they'll choose the book festival because it's contained as well. The massive problem as well is the timing of the Fringe to get young people involved. And if you go to a state school, you miss the first 2 weeks. If you go to a private school, which follow, you know, the English holidays, you're probably more likely to be able to put something on at the Fringe. But yes, I've been in Edinburgh all of my childhood until 18, where I went to Glasgow to study and then down to London. So it was a massive part for me because of the access I had to a youth theatre that I didn't have to pay to go to. And also, you know, when it wasn't so massive and you could walk down the Royal Mile and confidently not lose a child, you were exposed to all the amazing things. But for me to take my family of 5 to something that's happening, it's, you know, you're talking, you know, £100 plus to go and see something in the festival rather than the Fringe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a massive, you know, even for me as an artist, I go and see what my friends are in because I feel I have to invest in that. It's just so expensive.
Yeah. So again and again, we come back to this question of pricing and resources, and you know, the fact that so many people are just excluded from the best of this by the fact that it's just too damned expensive to see, never mind to be able to afford to put on a show.
Yeah.
So that's something that needs to be addressed, and won't be addressed if we have a continuing age of austerity, that's for sure. Julia, lovely to hear from you. Julia joined Festivals Edinburgh as director in December 2015. She's got 20 years of experience across the Scottish and UK cultural, education and international trade and investment sectors. So Julia's right on the intersection of these forces we've been talking about. Festivals Edinburgh is the kind of joint organisation that brings together all of Edinburgh's festivals and not just the August ones all year round, and leads on the joint strategic vision of these festivals, 12 of them, seeking to sustain the city's preeminence as the world's leading festival destination. Well, we had a wee discussion about that in the previous session. Do we need to be world beating or just kind of present, one of many great festival cities? Just before she went to Festivals Edinburgh, Julia worked for the British Council in Scotland and across the UK. So Julia, what would be your response to these questions from this session? What kind of art in the city does Edinburgh need for the future?
Well, I think just to jump in on your question, Joyce, about preeminent festival city, I think what we need is to be excellent in our own way, you know, and we've had a lot of very rich input so far about what that means. You know, it means that we must make sure that our festivals continue to feel authentically of our city and with our city. And it also means that we are an internationalist city and a capital city. So I think that dimension of what the festivals bring to our city is equally something that we need to look carefully at this very perilous moment, as everybody has indicated. You know, it is an opportunity, but it is not a foregone conclusion that Edinburgh will be able to hang on to what we most value about our festivals. So I think this is a very timely chance to get out lots of rich thoughts about what we most value. And what comes along with that. I was very taken with, you know, Angela at the very top of the first panel talking about the cultural vision and the cultural objectives, and then the pragmatic management of these prominent institutions in the city. And I think we need to go forward with both of those things. And as you've highlighted and other people have highlighted, there's an economic question in here. And if we're to get what we want, we will have to solve that kind of economic conundrum. So, you know, that's maybe something I can shed a bit of light on in terms of, you know, how our festivals cluster works, and what we've been trying to do collectively and collaboratively, as Andrew was saying, to kind of build those links and build those cultural, social and economic benefits. So as you say, our members run from that peak August season to some of the smaller, more family festivals like science, children's and storytelling festivals. And the fact that we established that cluster in 2007, I think those smaller festivals would absolutely agree that it's given them a great opportunity to develop over the years. An example of the kind of joined upness that I think Andrew was talking about, that I can't resist telling because I think it's just such a wonderful story, is a project that the Children's Festival and the Fringe collaborated on 3 or 4 years ago called Wee Night Out. They collaborated with Lyra Arts in Craigmillar, and they got together a panel of young people from Craigmillar to go and experience a range of shows in the Fringe Festival and select 1 or 2 to be programmed as part of the Children's Festival for their own community and for their peers. And I think there were many successful productions that came to the Children's Festival as a result of that. But the one that I really love talking about was a play about bullying in schools. Because by the time it came to Lyra, the person who was starring in that one-man play was an actor called Clay Spang, who at the very same time as he was appearing in a one-man play in Craigmillar, his film, The Square, was winning the Best Film Award at Cannes. So it's just that fantastic kind of melting pot that Edinburgh can be, and you know, that I think we all want it to be. So we're proud as festivals to be deeply internationalist in spirit and to bring some of those amazing moments to the city. But we first and foremost obviously want to belong to the city, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that 2/3 of people in the city do take part in the festivals and do very much see the festivals as belonging to them. But that translates to like 1.8 million attendances a year, which is more than 3 per head of population. At the same time, obviously, what that means is that 1/3 of the population don't yet get to access those opportunities. So, you know, it's great to talk about how we can connect up the networks. I think that's key, connecting up the networks and connecting the local and the global. So on a tangible note, since our 70th anniversary year in 2017, when the festivals spent a lot of time reimagining what the next phase of development could look like, we've managed to launch what we call the PLACE programme, the Platforms for Creative Excellence programme, which has been able to double our ability to reach out to schools in the city and to community groups in the city. I think it's more than 120 community groups in the city that that the festivals are now working with. And that, I think, will stand us in very good stead as we come back in the way that we all want through these festivals. But I do have to bring it back to earth in terms of the economics and the realities of you know, so much of the festivals landscape. Shauna, you talked a bit about it, that people are taking their own risks and people are putting their own money up there. And that is one of the answers to the questions that people are asking about. Why is it so concentrated in the city centre? And why is it at the time that it is in the year? It's at the time that it is in the year because it's a big industry event as well as a big audience event. And people need to be there when the programmers for other festivals around the globe are there. And that's part of the benefit that creatives get out of being platformed. But at the same time, you know, we know that makes it very fragile and that makes it very difficult. I saw Brian Ferguson and many others kind of commenting in the chat box about, you know, how do we square this circle? I think it will need investment. If we want that dispersal across the city, if we want that increased ability to subsidize people being able to take part in the festivals and see the festivals. And although, you know, I applaud, Joyce, your spirit of saying, you know, we shouldn't just swallow the idea of austerity in cultural funding. At the same time, I can't help thinking there are a lot of people in this city who have done very well out of the pandemic, people who are working in tech industries and in finance and in investment funds and so on. So I think we should all be talking about, you know, how we can raise more support for culture that's not necessarily simply the public support, but, you know, really galvanize the people of this city, if they care about culture, to kind of get behind these ideas that could help the festivals and the year-round culture of the city provide even more to even more people.
Oh, that's great, Julia. Thank you very much. I'm aware, because I write about it, of some of these community initiatives that you're talking about, you know, the sort of work that's been done by the cluster of 12 festivals to each of them in different ways reach out to community organisations across Edinburgh and work with them. And I remember writing about the big project that the International Festival did with one of the schools in Edinburgh, which was huge, where practically every kid in that school over a period had a chance to sort of work with the festival in some way, you know, finding out how to do front of house work, you know, all kind of technical things and so on. But they do seem to me to have quite a low salience. You still encounter quite a lot of people who just make sweeping comments like the Edinburgh Festival never does anything to connect with communities in Edinburgh, or the Fringe is nothing to do with Edinburgh, or, you know, I mean, people make these sweeping comments all the time, and it's like these projects aren't really sort of cutting through in people's awareness. And I wonder, is there something wrong with the way they're structured? Are they too top down? Is it, you know, why are people not more aware of them and more sort of enthused by them?
I think that part of the answer to that is that they are very much done with the community groups and with the schools that the festivals are working with. So you'd find that the parents of the children who are attending that school hopefully
are actually involved, or
involved. But I think this is something I'd be really interested to hear the other panelists' thoughts on this as well, is that actually that it is a bit like an iceberg, isn't it? That part of community arts isn't always very visible, because you're working on something which is very much about a co-production approach around what people want to do in their own neighbourhood. And that's maybe different from staging a show in that neighbourhood that would be with a name artist that other people would want to come into the neighbourhood and pay tickets for. And this is a genuine sort of, you know, conundrum that we're all working through together. We're doing some work with the University of Edinburgh about where the ticket buyers for the Fringe back. Are there places in the city that would be outside of the city centre, but would be more viable for people who have to earn ticket income? Because, you know, unless we're going to be able to subsidise the whole thing, then we are going to need to provide opportunities that that people can get audiences, paying audiences for. And you know, it's a really interesting conversation to have with neighbourhoods, which we quite often have with neighbourhoods, where some neighbourhoods will say, could you stage something in our neighbourhood that would bring people into the neighbourhood? You know, and we can look at the data and try and answer that question about whether that paying audience is there. But that's a different question from, are you doing something which is built with the community and with the local schools? And then they don't end up necessarily looking like the same, you know, the same kind of cultural activity. And I think there has to be room for both. So whether it matters that well, it matters at one level because it means that that work is not being recognised, but how you actually achieve a greater profile for the work that's under the radar, you know, I'm open to answers.
Well,
yeah, Shauna.
Well, I think what's been great about lockdown and everybody having to embrace technology is that we have this ability to stream people in from all over the world, and it doesn't matter what they're doing. So you can get, in terms of raising the profile of events so people actually come. I'm doing Monday masterclasses, it's called. So I've reached out to 11 of my industry friends and said, please come and do 90 minutes interview with me, and we will raise money for Edinburgh Youth Theatre. So we've got James Mcavoy, Irvin Welsh, and loads of other amazing people. And that's not a big deal for them to do. And we have to sort of harness this new world of technology and not be scared of it, and not think that theatre is just about, you know, being on a stage. We've got this, you know, chance to bring another element to it. And in terms of raising your profile, I'm sure you'll be able to, you know, get lots of amazing people, talent in front of the stage and behind the stage to be involved in that.
Fantastic. That I think that's true, Shauna, and I think, well, obviously Festivals Edinburgh will be thinking about what we've learned about online work during this time and how that can be used, particularly, as you say, to draw in people that might not be able to physically come to Edinburgh because of their schedules or whatever, but are still willing to lend, you know, some hours of time online. Andrew, you wanted to come in there. Andrew Crummy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that Julia's saying about how you work in communities is sort of an old sort of problem. It's great when it can work when people come into a community and you can get something. But what really community arts is about listening to what these communities they can do it themselves. They need the help, need to work with professionals. It's a difficult balance, but it's actually finding the voices within the community. And actually, a lot of them actually don't need that much to express themselves. It's just they're not being heard, you know. And it's like, and I think sometimes professionals can come in, or I've experienced as well, they come into a community and they can get a little bit further forward and they can get people to work with them, but actually they come and they go, and actually there's no difference before and after. There's a little bit of difference, but what my mother was talking about is, in the community arts thing, it's a much more listening approach, is where, you know, actually there's lots of voices out there. There's lots of people who want to take part in the festival. There's lots of people who've got great ideas, great songs, great poems, laughter, enjoyment, all the things that arts brings. But what they need is not necessarily a platform, but what they need is a structure to express themselves. And that's why you've got that group of festivals that you work with, Julia. Other smaller festivals, galas, etc., working that they have no funding, they have no structure. They do it every year. The local gala here in Port Seton runs every year, has about 2,000 people come every year. It receives no funding. It's just run by the mothers and fathers the gala, you know. And I think it's linking all them together, which is a much bigger challenge for the festivals, and it hasn't really been done. You know, the festival, the Craigmore Festival died, you know, and they're trying to bring it back now, and we've got the new Arts Centre at Craigmore now beside Fort Kinnaird. But you know, they need support. There needs to be some structure.
This is systemic, and I think it's bigger than the festivals, and it's bigger than culture. And Joyce was making the point earlier about local authorities and the powerless situation that they're in and that they've been in since in the last decade, and that has led to some of the, you know, types of decision making that has prioritized certain things over other things. So I think we need to all be looking very carefully at things like the planning legislation. You know, as I saw in the newspaper this morning that you know, property development is forecast to bounce back in Edinburgh. If property development bounces back in Edinburgh, how do we get a dividend for culture out of property development so that the kinds of community arts that you're talking about, Andrew, could get funding back? Because, you know, there's a lot of funding that's disappeared since the 1980s and that kind of heyday of that kind of provision. You know, there are new funds, despite the pain of Brexit. We've got to look to the future. There are new funds coming forward, like the Shared Prosperity Fund, which is about regenerating left behind areas of cities and regions. Could we, you know, tap into that in order to get, you know, more cultural activity going in the parts of the city that have seen that die? You know, I think you know, a lot of the phenomena that people have been talking about earlier this morning, and we'll be talking about later, I think, around Airbnb, around mass tourism. These are huge phenomena. They're not actually created by the festivals, you know, but they are things that we all need to get to grips with. So, you know, thank goodness we've now got the legislation in place so that places that are being crowded out by short-term lets can be managed, you know, and let's have that sort of citywide vision and that citywide system thinking about how we can bring back, you know, let's not lose the festivals, please. Let's not lose the festivals.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm glad that there was such a lot of support for, you know, us continuing to be a festival city, but let's also make sure that all these other things can come back, because as people have said, the pandemic's shown that we need them more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and building links between the kind of local events that Andrew's talking about and the big festivals is really an important maybe task for the next decade, and maybe one that, while it will need some resources, you know, it actually is not massive resources. You know, a very little money can make a big difference to a community arts organisation, in my experience, or certainly what seems like very little money to some of our, both to governments and to some of our wealthier donors. And I also think that's a really valuable point, Julia, that we need to some extent, I mean, obviously the festivals and tourism are linked because the festival city image is important to Edinburgh's tourism and all the rest of it. But from some of the issues, at least surrounding the festivals, because as you say, a city like Edinburgh with these huge kind of tourist attractiveness, festivals or no festivals, would probably at this stage be suffering from over tourism in the way that a lot of cities, ancient, you know, and beautiful historic cities in Edinburgh, in Europe are. And you know, we really need to, in fact, all over the world are. And in a way, we need to tackle the problems of over tourism, the better, to make space for our festivals to recover some of their names, I think. So yeah, anyway, we need to look, there's a huge amount going on in the chat, and I'm not going to be able to deal with it all, but I'm just looking at it. There's so much going on. Oh, I'm sorry, it's quizzing about, it's not scrolling very evenly. I love the festivals, says Ree Paris, having lived here for 40 years. My father was in Edinburgh in 1947 and talked about the festival. So, you know, there is this, I think, very strong abiding. It's maybe not as doesn't make as much noise as the people who are unhappy about things that have happened in relation to the festival. But I think there is a very strong abiding affection for the festival and the Fringe, you know, because it has meant a lot to people over the years. Over tourism is the issue. It has driven property out of the hands of residents to transient short-term visitors. Let's Airbnb. Moira Forrest asks, how can we use technology to widen participation? Well, we've talked about that, and I think there are all sorts of ways, exciting ways in which we can learn about that. We need international cultural collaboration and dialogue more than ever. Has the EIF, the International Festival, lost its focus on that? I don't think so. I think they're very keen, you know, to promote that and to think of new ways of doing it. Tom Dibden, my critic colleague who runs the All Edinburgh Theatre website, says that when he started reviewing, the Fringe was smaller but was much more evenly distributed throughout the city. So again, we're coming back to this hyper concentration that has happened. Is it for commercial reasons? Is it to do with the university? I remember interviewing Shauna McCarthy at the Fringe a couple of years ago about trying to get the Fringe to kind of move into areas where it doesn't currently appear, trying to build on the international festival's recent presence at Leith Theatre to kind of make Leith more of a Fringe hub. Nothing really seems to work in that sense. Everybody wants to be in the sort of central south side at the moment. Let's see, there's an interesting one, yeah. Large concerts in, that's Tom again, large concerts in Inverleith Park with very loud music which go on for hours, impacts on residents in Stockbridge. Oh, yeah, other parts of the city have residents as well, it says, not just the centre. A lot of people in Europe think the tattoo is the festival, yet nobody's mentioned it yet. That's very true. Does anybody want to say anything about the tattoo? Maybe Julia could comment on that.
I think that's a really unique phenomenon of our festivals as part of our intangible cultural heritage as a city, that it does serve such a huge spectrum. You know, we've talked and we must focus on the people who are not being served by the festivals, but at the same time, you know, I think it actually says something rather wonderful about Edinburgh, that it is a home to all of this gamut of culture, from, you know, marching up and down the square and absolute spectacular of the display of traditional music and to, you know, for possibility arts, which has, you know, come up so much since the Unlimited initiative around the Cultural Olympiad, and Edinburgh has been a real crucible for that. So I think it's something we should be extraordinarily proud of, that we are the proud hosts of, you know, the culture from A to Z.
Yeah, well, the tattoo certainly has an audience and appeals to a huge and popular audience from all over Scotland and the UK, you know, so it's a huge part of the festival mix. But then there are other comments about whether the festivals should be spread out more through the year. Well, as Morven Cunningham said in the last session, we may not have much choice over that, because, you know, just for public health reasons, for some time to come, it may not be possible to have all the festivals at once at the same time of year. But then there's the counter argument that people do love the buzz of having a city where there's 3, 4, 5 festivals going on at once, you know.
Could I just come back on that to explain one of the reasons why they all do happen in that August period? It's a lot to do with the position that they have in their industry, and you know this, Joyce, and Tom knows this in the audience, because, you know, you are understanding how shows get booked at the Edinburgh festivals and then will go on to tour elsewhere. So but that's not just the case for the performing arts festivals, it's also the case for the book festival. So the book festival has that prime position in August, which means that it is the place that authors want to come to talk about the books that are going to be on sale for the Christmas market. And as people might know, the Christmas market for books is like 90% of the annual book sales happen in the run up to Christmas. So we all want to make the best marriage between having a peak season and having a year-round offer for people. But it is a very complex picture, and there are kind of, you know, drivers for why the festivals are positioned where they are in the year. And it's, in many ways, it's a very favourable time of the year for for Edinburgh and Edinburgh's audiences and Edinburgh's participants to benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge number of, oh, I wish I could bring you all in, but there's a huge number of interesting points being made here. Spreading the festivals through the year. The Leith thing is curious. Why can't Leithers go to central Edinburgh? It's only a 10-minute bus ride, says somebody. You know, that is a question. What do we mean by an urban community now? And why are people prepared to travel miles for a football match, but, you know, would go in a bus up the road to see a Fringe show? It's you know, there's all these questions. Oh, what research do I know of? I don't, but I can ask other people.
Can I just come in as a
problem? Yeah, sorry, Shauna, this is something you've already raised, which is the problem about schools. I think part of the problem in August is that schools go back in the middle of August and people return to work. So congestion becomes a real problem, and the difficulty of getting onto local transport. Now, there are kind of two ways of looking at this. Some people think that the Fringe and Festival should take place in school holidays so that people are free to go to it and, as family and so on. And some people think it's better if the schools are in, because then it's easier for the festivals to work with the schools and to try and get kids to come to shows and so on. So that's another issue. Sorry, Shauna, I'll come to you now.
Yes, well, it wasn't so much with my hat of working in the community with young people. It was more about being an actor in Edinburgh. Edinburgh comes alive in the Fringe, and then everybody leaves. And where are all my venues that I can go and do a show? Edinburgh is, for me, is not the creative and cultural heart of Scotland when it's not during the festival. There's so much going on in Glasgow and other places in Scotland, and that is a frustration for me as somebody who would love to work in the city in which my children live in.
I think Morven in the first panel was highlighting some of the issues around how expensive a city Edinburgh is to live in for artists and creatives who are not in, you know, generally a high earning bracket. And I think that's absolutely something that needs to be on all of our radars if we, you know, want the cultural scene to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Shauna's raised a vital question there just at the very end about how much, given that a lot of the other festivals that happen throughout the year are not explicitly cultural, you know, that the Science Festival has strong cultural elements, obviously, and strives to overcome the barriers between science and culture, but its primary aim is science. The Children's Festival is certainly cultural, the Storytelling Festival, but there's a lot of negatives here about the winter festivals, which are seen as being almost purely a commercial operation, particularly now that they're being run by Underbelly in the way that they are, rather than by Pete Irvin, who did work quite hard at putting some kind of element of sort of Scottish cultural input into the Hogmanay festival. So there's a lot of hostility to the winter festivals, and there's a kind of abiding question in Edinburgh about why, if it is such a major festival city, which it is, why is it not a stronger cultural city all the year round? It does have some year-round cultural life, but, you know, kind of 2 theatres on the go. It's not a lot really for a city of this size. And there is certainly in the performing arts a huge amount more activity in Glasgow. And you know that if you're a person who reviews the performing arts in Scotland. So there are issues around making Edinburgh more of a year-round cultural city. And maybe that could be another focus. Maybe it would in the end strengthen the festivals themselves if Edinburgh was able to develop a bit more of that year-round identity. Well, once again, we're running out of time, but I'm going to give each of our 3 terrific panelists a chance to say a final word. Andrew, have you got any thoughts that have been discussed that you'd like to add?
Just one thought really about the Great Tapestry of Scotland. When we opened the week after the festival closed in 2013, within the first week, we were up to 5,000 people a day coming to see the tapestry outside of the festival, which just shows, I think, again, if you create art that involves people, mainly, you know, not just from Edinburgh, but from Scotland, they will come to see the work because they will come to see their own creativity, and they'll bring all their friends, etc. And, you know, when we returned the following year to the Scottish Parliament, we had 90,000 visitors. You know what I mean? So it's like the power of trying to involve and let the voices of ordinary folk express themselves, I think, is really powerful. And that's, I think, why you've got the Great Tapestry going open in the Galashiels later on this year.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, could the sort of year-round, some kind of commitment to year-round Edinburgh actually be the way of sort of strengthening the festivals and public support for them in the future? Shauna, have you got any final comments?
Yeah, well, for me, it's not about helicoptering in any kind of giving someone an experience of creating art and once in their lifetime or once in their school time. The bigger question and problem is the expressive arts are disappearing in the curriculum in Scotland and in primary schools. It's 1/8, you know, of the 8 sections of the pie, and it seems to be down to the talent or not of the teachers that they have. There's no dedicated drama teacher that visits your school anymore, and the music teachers, you know, that doesn't exist anymore. So if we're talking about how to have creative art created by people that live within Scotland, you've got to start that at a young age. They've got to understand that they can be part of this, and it's not something that they have to take themselves to or find the funds to attend. It has to be thread throughout their whole life, starting from school.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the kind of upbringing that Andrew talked about. When you say there are no music teachers, though, are you talking about?
I mean, primary school, the peripatetic voice. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Music teachers. Yeah, absolutely tragic.
And I think it's harder engaging a young person in the arts when they get into secondary school level.
Yes,
as well. So,
yeah. It's vital at primary age. And that's why I'm quite serious about my rebellion against austerity, because I just can't really see any point in a wealthy society that doesn't fund things like that. I mean, you know, we don't need to tolerate it, and we shouldn't really. Julia, would you like to finish off?
So I'm very taken with, you know, Andrew's talk about how we link the local and the global better. And I think that's absolutely an agenda that the festivals are looking at as we come back. Although obviously in the near term, we won't be able to come back in anything like a full form, but that's very much top of the agenda. And Shauna, you know, the focus on young people, absolutely critical, totally agree, and integrating with the education system. Because, you know, if you have culture, a sense of belonging and being able to explore culture as within your identity growing up, I think that's one of the best things you can do for your well-being, and you'll be able to draw on that for the rest of your life. So bringing some of those threads together, what the festivals I work with have been working on, looking beyond this pandemic, is a 10-year sustainable festival city vision. So, you know, some of the pillars of that are about how do we get more people-centered spaces? How do we get an offer that can inspire everyone? How do we make sure that valuable skills and work are baked into that model? And how do we make sure that we still have the kind of global solidarity that means that we're looking at the local and the global at the same time? You know, there are no easy answers to those questions, but I think we've made a good go this morning, both among the audience and across the panel, of seeing how we can kind of pull the focus back a little and look at the really big picture and look at what resources we can draw in to help us all do that.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much for a really great session. And I'm sorry we overran a little bit, shortening everyone's tiny lunch break. But I thought it was really worth just exploring some of the ideas, particularly from our great speakers. And of course, trying to, I mean, we haven't anywhere near covered all the ideas that are coming up in the chat, but at least we managed to deal with some of them. So I want to give my personal round of applause, and I trust it's being echoed out there, to our 3 fantastic speakers for this session: Andrew, Shauna and Julia. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for being with us. I'll be back, I think, as a panelist in the final session this afternoon, and I'll be watching the first 2 sessions this afternoon, really, with great interest to see how these ideas are taken forward. And I believe the next session starts at 1:15. But once again, Shauna, Andrew, Julia, thank you so much for helping us with that great discussion, and a few ideas emerging at the end that made me feel really hopeful for the future of Edinburgh as a different kind of festival city, maybe. Thank you, Terry.
And thank you very much for all of that. I think you can, hopefully you can just hear my disembodied voice, or perhaps not.
We can see you, it's lovely.
You can see me, excellent. Yeah. Okay, here we are. There we go. I've got that off, and I assume you can hear me too as well. So thank you very much for all of our panelists, and Joyce for an absolutely brilliant chairing of those panels, which is inspirational. I think what everyone was saying, and I think is creating a really fantastic collaborative agenda to carry this conversation forward, which is what we really kind of hoped. We reconvene again at 1 o'clock, so we look forward to that. For those panelists who still will be with us, Shauna, Julia, kind of Andrew, will be putting you kind of into the audience, formally for that, and waiting for Stephen Jardine to come join us, who will chair the afternoon session for the plenary one. And again, thank you so much for actually participating, and we'll see you all, metaphorically at least, at 1 o'clock. Thank you.